my name is Abigail and welcome back to Polyglot Progress. Over the summer, I made a video about my bullet journal and how I use it to track my language learning. And in the past few months, I've changed up the way that I use not only my bullet journal in general, but especially how I use my bullet journal when it comes to language learning. So I thought that I would show you my new setup specific for language learning, and maybe it will help you find a system that works a little bit better for you as well. I will say before I start this, I have gotten an overwhelming number of comments on my first bullet journal video saying that I spend way too much time planning and not enough time doing, that I spend more time making these spreads than I do learning languages, and so on and so on. So before we start, I just want to say that everything that I do is to make my life more streamlined and more productive. I spend so much less time doing things and have so many more things done because I'm spending less time procrastinating and more time working on the things that I'm aiming to do. If you're confused by that, I suggest watching this video, which is on how and why I set goals and why I feel you should as well. That might help clear things up a little bit. And also just the spreads that I make really don't take very long to create. So if you see this and you're a little bit worried about it being super time consuming, just want to assure you that it really doesn't take very long. Also, just one last thing about my old video, I've gotten so many people sending me pictures of them replicating my bullet journal spread, and it's really cute and it warms my heart. So if after watching this video you also feel inspired to make a bullet journal or use this in your bullet journal, feel free to send it to me because I love seeing it. Okay, so for anyone who has not watched my old video or is unfamiliar with bullet journaling, this is just a dotted moleskin. At the time I filmed my last one, I was working in a gridded moleskin, but I found that I actually really preferred the dotted ones. It just looks so much cleaner. Basically, I use this to plan my life in general. It's a bit like a planner for me. You can also use bullet journals as like a diary and a sketchbook and really whatever you want. That's the whole point, is they're fully customizable. But for me, I just kind of use it in place of a planner. I feel that it allows me to kind of break down my goals a bit better than a normal planner I buy from the store would. It also just allows me to keep track of more things because I'm not restricted to a simple daily layout. So in here I have things like my yearly goals, monthly calendars where I track things that I have going on that month, my homework assignments that are due each week so that way I make sure I get all my work done, and also just kind of weekly spreads which I use basically like a normal planner, and I plan things I have going on in a little calendar. I am able to see my week in relation to the month ahead so that I know kind of when I need to have future projects done, and also just daily to-do lists so that way I make sure that I'm getting a little bit of things done each day, not procrastinating everything, and keeping myself from getting too overwhelmed with the amount of work that I have. Like I said, one of my favorite things about the bullet journal is how customizable it is. So if this looks like a little too much color, a little too much fun washi tape and things, you can feel free to do the whole thing in pencil if that's what's gonna work for you. Personally, I do better visually when I can see different colors for different events kind of going on in my life. It's just how I kind of process things that are going on, and that makes this very effective for me. And I also just enjoy taking some time at the end of the weekend to make my next week's spread. It's something that relaxes me, and that's something that I do as a self-care thing. So it's a good thing, and it doesn't mean that I spend more time planning than doing things. It just means that I could be doing it in a sketchbook, but instead I do it in my planner. One difference from the last video is that in the last video I showed you my tracker and goals list that went in this bullet journal, but in the past few months I've actually moved over to having a separate bullet journal for languages, which sounds totally crazy, but it's actually been so much more effective for me. One of my problems with putting my tracker and my goals for languages in my normal bullet journal is that they'd very quickly get covered up. Each of them would be for 3 months at a time, but when I'm using 3 pages for each school week, it means that they get covered up very, very quickly, and it meant that I would have to flip back a lot to get to it, and I'd end up just kind of forgetting about it for many days, and I wouldn't really track my language learning, and therefore it wasn't holding me accountable the way it needed to. So at the start of 2018, I started a bullet journal specifically for my languages. I'd been toying around with this idea for a while, but it seemed like one of those things that was going to be so much more work and effort than I wanted to put into things. But since I've started it, it has been so much more effective and so much less time consuming, and I'm able to see all my language things and just keep all my goals for languages very separate and and clear, and it's holding me so much more accountable. That being said, I don't really fill this up that much, so any of these spreads could be easily adapted into a regular bullet journal. So when you first open this up, I have two spreads that are kind of related to the year. So I have one that is my levels at the start. I got this idea from Lindy Boats, so that way I'll be able to compare it at the end of the year. I've also written myself little notes to kind of talk about why I feel like I'm at those levels and where I feel like I am in the languages, what kind of things I want to be working on. And then on the other side, I have my 2018 goals and resolutions. These are all things I talked about in the goals and resolution podcast, but again, just things to keep myself on track throughout the year. Then I have pretty much the newly updated version of what I showed in my last bullet journal video, which is my tracker and goals list. Because I have a separate notebook, instead of doing 3 months at a time, I'm now doing it month by month, and honestly this works a lot better for me. It means that I can plan out the goals month by month, which makes it a lot easier and more manageable to do the things that I'm hoping to do in languages. So I've got my tracker, which is the same thing I showed in the last video, but if you didn't watch that, basically I have all of the days of the month, and each color in here represents a different language that I study. So each day that I study it, I get to put the lines in. And then on the other side, I have my goals, like I said, and I also have an ideal routine because January was my winter break, so I was at home, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I wasn't able to study languages really at all last semester, so I wanted to be able to kind of catch up. And then down at the bottom, I have my goals for the month. Then you've got the same thing for February. I didn't really make so much of an ideal routine, but I did try to write in parts of my day each day of the week when I could fit language study in. Now that I'm back at school, it's a bit easier for me to just kind of fall back on being like, I've got class, I can't study. So I wrote down some ways that I could squeeze it in every day just to kind of hold myself to that. And then down here, once again, you have some goals. Then I put after the first 3 months, so after what will become my March spread, I have 2 things that are for this year as well. My Goodreads goal this year is to read 50 books, and I decided that I wanted to make a 5th of that books that are not in English, just to push myself to be reading more in other languages. So on here, I made myself a TBR for the year. So I just made myself a checklist of books to read, and I haven't fully filled it in, but it's something that I'll fill in as I go along, and at least it kept me kind of thinking about how many books I wanted to be reading in each language. This is again just a way to hold myself accountable. It's very easy for me to say that I want to read more books in languages and then forget about it, but by having a nice little list that I have to check off by the end of the year, it holds me to it, and it's also a good way for me to track the books that I've read this year. On the side next to that, I have my plan for this year for the languages that I'm studying. I did mention in a podcast a little while back that I felt like kind of planning out my languages for the year the way most polyglots do doesn't really work for me, so I found a way to make it work for me, which is planning it out while that month comes and kind of having a vague plan before that. So also I've split it into 3 different types of learning. You've got your actively studying, which is what it sounds like, then improving, which is kind of when I do less of it but I am kind of studying it, just kind of furthering my level in the language, and then maintaining, which is just things like reading books, watching shows, speaking the language, that sort of thing. So my square is actively studying, the triangle is improving, and the circle is maintaining. And I've kind of just broken down what languages I want to be doing what in for each month of the year. And I've done this around knowing what I'm gonna do at that point in time. So on here you can see the polyglot conference. Before that, I want to improve all the languages, that sort of thing. So it's just kind of been a nice, easy way to know what I want to be doing where, again, just to make sure that my yearly goals happen. I mainly wanted to do this so that at the end of the year I can look back and see what I was studying when and kind of use that as a way to better my language studies next year. And so that's the language bullet journal for now. And then going off of that, I just include normal language things that I want to do within my normal bullet journal in my day-to-day life. If I need to be doing a Spanish lesson, then I'll just write it in with things I have to do. If I want to make sure that I study German for 30 minutes, I'll write that in my to-do list. Overall, I've been really liking having my language learning notebook in a separate thing because I do my bullet journal off of school semester and I do my language learning kind of off of the calendar year. So having another notebook means that I'm able to kind of track things based on the year, and because I use so little pages in this, I'm going to be able to use this for probably 2 or 3 years. So I'll be able to reflect at the end of each year really well and learn what works for me, what doesn't work for me, and how I can further my language learning. I'm also really excited because this will be able to show me how much I've progressed in each language. I'm able to see where I'm at the start of each of these years, and I'll be able to see it further at the end of each of them. This one really is like a school and kind of general life planner, so having a language thing separate just really works for me and and my brain. But again, if you feel like it would work better for you in your normal bullet journal, these spreads are so easily adaptable for that. My number one recommendation would be willing to just try things out and see what works for you. This is my third bullet journal and it has changed so much in the 3 years that I've been using one, and I've just managed to make it so much more streamlined and so much more productive and so much better suited to my life at the time as it's gone on. If you want to know anything else about my bullet journaling process or have any questions for me about starting your own bullet journal, please let me know. I will try my best to respond to your comments. If you have any pictures of the way you bullet journal, whether it's similar or so different from mine, please tag me in pictures. I would love to see them. And if you would like to see like a plan with me kind of video at any point about my language learning bullet journal, also let me know about that, because I've been considering doing videos where I kind of set up my next month in my bullet journal and kind of reflect upon my last month of language learning. And if you want to see more study and especially language related content, make sure you subscribe, because we are posting a video every single day this month, so there are tons of videos to get you motivated to study a language as well. I'll see you guys soon, and remember, practice makes progress. Bye guys.